swindled out of £20,000.
You just always knew the right things to say.
What an awful thing to go through.
Tricked by a young man trained to scam them.
There's no sympathy. I'm the mastermind behind the whole thing.
My dad was really ill, and I'd had a couple of people really close to me passing away. Just really scared me that someone else I cared about was gonna potentially die if they didn't get treatment and help that they needed.
It took Suzanne Famula a second to swipe right on her dream man, and another 5 months before she realised he was a walking nightmare.
Over the months that we were there, we'd talk about like our future plans.
On paper, Christopher Harris ticked all the boxes. Smart, charming and attractive. But in reality, he was a serial fraudster with 16 previous convictions for more than 25 offences. He also wasn't dying, and the mystery heart condition he told Suzanne he needed a life-saving £20,000 for was all part of an elaborate ruse.
So he knew all my vulnerabilities, like around losing people, and he fully took advantage of that fact. Knowing how much I care about people and the people that mean a lot to me, I will do whatever I can to help them in any way, shape or form.
In a digital age, love can blossom online, but in the dimly lit corners of the internet where anonymity reigns, danger can often lurk in the shadows. This is a story about romance scams and the people, victims and cons interwoven in a sophisticated online network of deception worth billions. Stay with us to uncover the truth about romance scams. This video was created by Sumsub, the verification platform. We make the digital world people-friendly yet secure. Romance scams involve con artists, opportunists, and sometimes even criminal networks who create fake identities on dating platforms or social media sites to build emotional connections and ultimately exploit victims for money. This is the anatomy of a romance scam. First comes the lure.
So I met Christopher on a dating site. He seemed like a really nice, normal, down-to-earth person. Like, we had the sort of same values. You know, we both had sort of similar family relationships.
Next, building trust and intimacy.
I remember our first meeting, I actually told him that my mum had passed away, and previously I told him that my dad was in rehab just suffering a stroke. And then he told me that he had a twin brother that died of a brain tumour when they were 12. So it was like you had that shared connection of loss. It felt really nice to know that, you know, someone else has been through a similar thing.
Finally comes the con.
And then he said he got sick. This was all after a few weeks. That's when like the first payment sort of he kind of asked for.
Suzanne is just one of thousands of victims to this multi-billion-dollar scam. And in a post-pandemic world where people seek connections through online connectivity, social media sites and dating apps offer the perfect breeding grounds for criminality.
And whenever you have more traffic, you know, that's where you find more scammers or more fraudsters orienting themselves there too. So it's just a logical progression of people going more online, being more digital, and that's where we find the criminals as well, unfortunately.
Sadly, for many seeking love online, scammers have turned dating sites and social media into their own personal hunting grounds, and almost no one is safe.
To be honest, I really think everyone is vulnerable to a certain extent, and there's this perception that only elderly ladies fall for romance scams, and that's totally not true. You just have to be in some way vulnerable or open to emotional manipulation.
Scammers often craft elaborate personas, weaving tales of affection and longing, only to exploit vulnerability for financial gain. And for those sucked into romance, it's often difficult to see the red flags.
When you come across something that triggers your emotions, and obviously we are online and dating apps for a human connection, so it is emotional. But if something is too strong too soon, if somebody declares their undying love within, you know, a few days or a few weeks, that is too much, and that's a warning signal.
But not everyone can see or acknowledge those warning signs. And in some cases, the consequences have been deadly. In the case of Laura Kowal from Illinois in the United States, her online lover managed to ensnare her in a 2-year romance scam that would end in a tragedy. In October 2018, the 57-year-old met a self-described Swedish investment advisor named Frank Borg on the dating site Match.com. And following months of email exchanges and giddy phone calls, the pair fell hopelessly in love despite never meeting. By 2020 and $1.5 million in the red, Laura was dead. The victim of a romance scam that led her to commit suicide. In 2023, there were 381.48 million dating service users in the world, with the FBI estimating that in the same year, victims in the US lost over $1.3 billion to romance scams, with significant losses reported in the UK, Canada, and Australia. While scammers primarily operate on social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and X, and on dating apps like Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, and Match.com, others have found their victims on grief forums, and not even celebrities have been immune to the clutches of scammers. In a case currently playing out in Spanish courts, Oscar winner Brad Pitt's likeness was used to con 2 unsuspecting women out of hundreds of thousands of euros. The suspects made contact with the women on an internet page for fans of Pitt, and led them to believe they were in an emotional chat relationship with him, before encouraging the victims to invest in various projects that did not exist. In total, the victims were defrauded of 175,000 euros and 150,000 euros. It's something Suzanne knows all too well.
He just always knew the right things to say, and he always had the answers. If I questioned him, he always had an answer of a reason, and it was like on the spot, like really quick. Like there was no thinking about it. I don't know if he had some sort of script.
And with more and more sophisticated online products emerging and the advent of AI and deepfake technologies, it's becoming easier than ever for scammers to ply their trade, often with little to no legal consequences for their actions. In the West African countries of Ghana and Nigeria, so-called hustle academies are contributing to the rise in online romance scam cases. In 2023, the US reportedly lost about $50 billion to online scams.
It is a serious crime, and unfortunately it's not taken as a serious crime. You are being manipulated. It is a form of coercive control. You're being controlled and manipulated into sending someone money.
If you've been on a dating app in the US in the past few years, swiping in an age range from men 42 and older, chances are you've come across this profile. This is Dr. Alec Kuros, but he's also known by scores of other names with addresses in different cities and countries, and on any given day, his profession ranges from pilot to doctor and even a horse wrangler. But the Canadian professor is none of those things. Since 2007, Alec has been the unwitting face of online dating scams, with his pictures being used to catfish hundreds, if not thousands of women worldwide.
And so I think, part of this is the complicity from social media companies like Facebook in particular. If you look up my name on Facebook, you'll see a number of me. Now, I've been very successful where there used to be 50 photos of my name and my photos. Now there are maybe 10 or 5. I've got them down quite a bit.
Today, Alec estimates the number of his victims to be in the thousands, and he anticipates this number to keep growing over the next few years.
We have to be very thoughtful about what we see online. We are in a place where there's so much information that's difficult to assess in a short order that we are in a state of collapse in terms of our intellectual ability to discern truth from falsities.
While the true cost of romance scams to date is immeasurable, experts say the figure could amount to over $535 billion globally. In Europe, 1 to 3% of the general population claim to have been the victim of romance scams. In Sweden, police data revealed that around 52 million euros was lost annually in 1,300 documented romance frauds. According to Finnish police data from 2020, 210 scams with losses totaling 6.1 million euros were reported. This figure rose to 10.4 million euros in 2023. And in 2022, romance scams made up 29% of all scams carried out in the UK. And the scammers on dating sites and social media are almost always experts at this type of cybercrime, which makes it very difficult for them to catch. But hope is not lost. Romance scams come in all shapes and sizes, and falling victim to such can have serious long-term consequences. Spotting the scam or the potential of one is the first step. From the traditional catfishing scams, whereby scammers create fake profiles and personas to hook a victim with, then there's the classic tall tales associated with what's known as emergency schemes. Whether it's an urgent need for a cash injection to help release international funds, or telling a victim some fantastical story about a mystery illness, it's these well-crafted stories that usually results in a victim falling for a romance scam. Report the crime to your local law enforcement agency and your bank. Prompt reporting increases the chances of success in asset recovery linked to scams. Ceasing all communication with the scammer. This one may be easier said than done, especially if a victim has already forged an intense emotional connection with the person on the other side of the screen. Talking to a loved one or friend to get their opinion about the situation. Again, not so easy for some, given the shame, embarrassment, and anger attached to being a victim of this type of scam. But resources are available both online and in person, given the rise in and sophistication of these scams. But with romantic deception becoming so commonplace in everyday life, it's the emotional aftermath for victims that lingers long after the scammer and the money have gone.
So I think the first thing is to remember that they've been victims of organized crime. So they really shouldn't blame themselves about it. And I know this is the natural feeling, like we always look for faults in ourselves and take responsibility, which is a healthy human way of doing things. But in this case, you've been conned by an organization, in most cases, or a syndicate that knows exactly what they're doing.
It's an awful place to be because you feel stupid, you feel ashamed, you feel worthless, like you feel all these awful emotions and you feel all these awful things about yourself that you know you don't want to tell people, because once you realise you shouldn't have done it, but you have, and you don't want to hear what people have got to say.
And while it's possible to report the crime to the platform to have a user blocked or banned, victims like Suzanne and Alec have called for the dating sites to assume more responsibility. Awareness and vigilance are crucial in navigating a treacherous online landscape, where the allure of romance can mask sinister intentions. But Suzanne has vowed not to let her ordeal make her more of a victim or deter her from finding love online.
I think I would probably say to him, thank you for making me a stronger person than what I already was. It's a pathetic excuse for a man. And he's going to die a lonely old man with no friends, no family, and no one. Because who's going to want someone like him?